Welcome everybody to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky and thank you so much for joining me for, I hope maybe would be our final feedback session for our 45 episode long introduction to acrylic painting course, which wrapped up just a few weeks ago. And that gave a little bit of extra time for people who were maybe a little bit behind the course to catch up and submit their paintings so that we could look at them today. So we're going to look at the final, I think, 6 or 7 artists that we were inspired by to create paintings, from Anne Savage all the way to Kate Graham. And if this is the first time you've ever seen me, or you've maybe watched one of the episodes, I'm just going to do a quick little mention of the Facebook group, because this is how I find the pictures that you guys send me. Is if you join the Facebook group, and there's a link in the first thing in the video description below, you can join that and you can see all the incredible artwork that people have been creating recently. So look at all these. You know, I was there have been almost 400 images that you guys have submitted over the past 4 months for this class. So that is, you know, and it's a lot of managing where all those files go, but that's the best problem, if you could even consider it a problem, that I could ever have, is that there's that many people who are that excited about painting along with me. So let's begin at, where should we begin? You know, maybe I did want to mention kind of right off the top, when it comes to this is actually just a photograph. I took a screenshot. You'll see that I get this kind of thing a bunch of times, people trying to join the Facebook group, and you know, when I see things like this, they have 2 friends, they joined Facebook a year ago, they haven't been able to answer the 2 questions. Oh, thank you, love. That's awesome. I need my tea for the show. Appreciate it. Thank you, love. So this is the kind of thing where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to approve somebody to join our group, just because I don't know what that seems a little bit odd, right? So I just want to, unless somebody thinks that this is somebody who would be a good member to join our group, I think I've already denied that one. Anyway, so I wanted to mention that right up front, because I'm trying to do my best to keep everyone's privacy private, right? Let me, while this loads up. So starting here with Anne's. Let's do that again. Let's do it again. Okay, hopefully that's all of them. 16. Okay, good. So here is our, if you recall, Anne Savage, who we painted, I guess this would have been, when was this? Right around the beginning of January. So it's not too long ago that we did this this painting. So this would have been a couple days after New Year, the week after New Year's, I think we started this one. So it's good that we're kind of catching up. And then the next session we'll do will be for the first few paintings we've made from the master study and the Paint the News classes, which have been great. The work, you know, the volcano picture I just saw, it's so cool. Okay, so anyway, this is Ace 17's version. One of our students in Germany who painted this version of Anne Savage's painting. Anne Savage, of course, being one of the great Canadian artists, and what I think is really interesting is seeing people from around the world learning for the first time about the great artists that we've had here in Canada over the couple hundred years Canada's existed here. And then, of course, it's been exciting seeing those of you from Canada learning about artists from elsewhere around the world as well. So This is, I think, a fantastic job here, Ace. I love this turquoise color in the leaves of the tree here. That is a really nice, beautiful, cold color, right? It really feels icy cold here. And, you know, probably if I was to do this painting again, I'd probably try to get a little bit more of that in there. So that's a fantastic job. And then that little bit of warm blue in there, I think also works. It kind of makes it look like there's maybe a little bit of the water that we can see through the ice. It might be a little bit thin there, so just be careful about walking on this little patch of ice. Yeah, fantastic job. Great job, Ace. Hope you continue painting along with us, because you did a great job of this. I don't know if you sent too many more other ones in, so let's move on here to Deborah's version. Look at that. Wow, I love this one. I think, you know, what I really like is you've got a little bit more of the you know, it's like that kind of weeping willowish kind of thing, that this kind of light, very, very light blue that's kind of drooping down in there really helps reinforce the shape of those of the how would you call that, the body of those leaves, and gives them volume and weight, right? Because obviously it's getting darker towards the bottom part, right? So it feels like there's the weight of the snow on there that's kind of pulling those branches down. That is really cool. I like that one a lot. And it's a little bit darker too, so we have a little bit more of, a darker blue, black brown kind of in there, which I think makes it a little bit more of like a subdued color, you know, obviously, as opposed, you know, to Ace's here, which is like really kind of an icy blue, right? These look like ice cubes on here, whereas this has a bit more of like this actually reminds me a lot more of Anne Savage's painting. Not to say that one is better than the other. I think it's really interesting just to see how we all interpret these things. And then we have Dolores here. Wow, cool. So again, just another different kind of take in here. What I love here about the way Dolores has done this is, you know, we have a little bit of that blue coming in through the trees. Like, I mean, just think about how, I mean, I know it seems so ridiculous, but little things like that help give it depth, right? Like, so we're seeing through the trees another little color on the other side in behind. That's nice too. I think that's a little bit of an innovation I didn't have there. It makes it look like the water's kind of coming around and this tree might be on a little island unto its own in the middle of that small pond. Very cool. And it's very believable that these posts are, you know, the fence is descending in there. Looks cool. This reminds me of Calgary in the winter, when everything kind of gets a little bit brown. The snow, in Calgary, everything just goes really brown in winter, because it's just a lot of, everything dies. Everything dies in winter, as opposed to Edmonton, where everything kind of freezes and stays green, and then the springs are really, really bright and green and lush, like a tropical kind of quality. Calgary, everything just stays brown all year long until about like July, and then it's bright green for 3 months. Anyway, I'm from Calgary, that's why, and I've spent a number of times up in Edmonton as well, and Calgary, Edmonton have this rivalry, so it's, anyway. Wow, cool, it's a totally different take. Donna, that is neat. Wow. So this reminds me, makes me think of like nighttime, like moonlight, the same scene painted at a different time of day, right? This much darker grays in here, and these blues with just these little highlights of white make it look like it's at nighttime, and we have this little bit of moonlight that's highlighting the scene. And we also have a lot more snow down here, right? So this is kind of a blizzardy, this feels really cold. This is probably how most people in Canada feel right now, covered in snow. But I also have a very fond memories of the snow and at night growing up. I just see May says the sound is off sync. There is probably a small little delay between my voice and my mouth moving. Hopefully it's not 20 seconds like we had when we were doing, what painting was that? The Amanda Gorman, where there was a massive glitch. So my apologies if we have a big delay here. Okay, next up. So I think this is great. I also think what's interesting here, Donna, is the way that you've kind of like stamped the leaves on here is also very different than everyone else's. So that's cool. It could almost, like, you'd see doing this with thumbprints, like Chuck Close, who's a famous artist that we looked at a little bit in the drawing class. Wow, Gail. Very cool. So I don't know what it is about your painting. This one here, I feel the tree branches a lot more than in any of the other ones so far. It feels like that is much more brought to the fore in this particular paint. Let's zoom in a little bit because we got a lot of. Won't let me go in between that zoom, but I really like these branches dark like that. I think it's one of the most interesting parts of trees personally. I think I've mentioned before I love painting trees in winter when you can see like the branches as opposed to all of the leaves on there, right? Really cool. I feel a lot more volume, a lot of volume on these leaves, which again is, I think, a big part of that painting. And it reminds me a lot of Emily Carr, which we're going to do another one of hers in a few months, or well, maybe a little bit sooner than a few months, but we'll see. Wow, Heidi, that is interesting too. Wow, just so, I love looking at the same painting done as many different ways as possible. So this, what is interesting about this is it looks like we have a bit of a dry brush technique, right? We can see some of the canvas or that first color that's been put down kind of coming through. So this kind of brown that's coming through, I don't know if that was the color that you put down to begin with, but it's showing through. This is a lot more like maybe Matisse would have painted, or any of the Fauve artists. So that's just super interesting to see how that turned out. What else could I say about that? Yeah, beautiful, really nice. Yeah, I mean, this is maybe a little bit more closer to how I personally paint my own artworks, is I like having a little bit of this canvas showing when I'm making my own art. So I think that's, I have a kind of an affinity for that kind of thing. Let me see. And this is, I think, just a little slightly darker version of the same painting, right? And then, wow. I mean, talk about the difference, right? So Heidi's here having much more of this dry brush quality versus Iris here has, you know, a very clean, sharp focus kind of image, right? So whereas, let's say Heidi's has a more impressionist or Fauvist kind of quality, this reminds me a lot more of, let's say, Maud Lewis, right? Where we have really distinct, the colors either are overlapping or match up side by side. We don't see any of that kind of fuzziness around the shapes. And so these branches, you know, really pop just as much as, let's say, Gail's here. Although Gail's almost like in between here. So it's like, let's say we had Heidi, Gail, and then Iris, right? Where it becomes more and more like almost like an illustration. I could see this kind of thing being done with gouache or Very, I mean, I just blows my mind. That's super cool to see all these different approaches here. And let's rotate that one. Ah, here's May's version of that same painting. Wow. Okay, so what's interesting is we see there is a kind of a diagonal in a few of these, but you've really accentuated that. So if this feels, now looking at that painting and seeing this, because it makes it look like a horizon line in the background, and it makes, I feel now like I'm looking a little bit higher down on this scene than I think I was in any of the other ones, which is not a problem. I just think it's, what's so interesting is just a little line like that now makes it feel like I'm on a hill kind of walking down into a valley, and I'm kind of at the top of the hill looking down, and here's the other side of the other top of the other hill, versus these, I feel a little bit more like I'm just sort of trudging on a little bit, I'm a little bit above, I'm about the same, like this is definitely the lowest part of the painting, but it's just, I find it super interesting that a little line like that, for me, makes it feel like you've increased the depth of that valley. And again, these branches and the weight of the snow on them, really interesting. I'd be interested to know how, I think in a number of your paintings, I see a lot of texture coming through. And I wonder if that's when you're applying gesso that you're getting that texture, which is one of the reasons, when I gesso, I use the sandpaper afterwards kind of to smooth it down so I get a nice smooth surface. Because that's one thing I've seen a little bit of, which, and there are artists who go out of their way to put a ton of texture. They get molding, or is it molding paste? Yeah, or modeling paste, and apply all sorts of texture to the canvas and then paint over top of it. One of the artists that we're going to talk about in, I think about 6 weeks, Jay DeFeo, an American artist, very famous for a number of abstract paintings which have a lot of texture. Like we're talking like, on the wall, when you look at it from the side, they're really, really thick. And so much so that I have a few different ideas of how I want to create a painting like that. Anyway, let's, oh, is this, oops. Oh, is this the same? This is May again. I think this is May again. So, oh, the same, is this 2 different paintings or different stage? It looks like 2 different versions of the same painting. Wow. And I'm sure when you posted it, you put down some notes as to what the difference between these were, May. Obviously, I don't have that information right at the top here, but wow. That is, again, we can go all the way back up to the beginning here with Aces. That was really bright turquoises in here. And then we see this. We have a lot of that same really icy colors in here. Wow. And, not that I don't like this one, but this definitely takes everything. I would assume you painted this after having done the other one. So I always think, even if I was to go back and repaint all of the paintings that I did, they would all be 2 or 3 times better than the first version I painted. It's possible that a few of them, the first version I did, would be better, and that I wouldn't be as happy with my second or third version of it, but it would be unlikely, right? Just because all the things that I've learned, even if I forgot everything I learned, just doing it again, that there's a bit of muscle memory in there, and knowing the composition and just being that little bit more familiar with it will just make things so much easier. I always use the analogy of if you've ever been typing out an email and then you somehow delete it, or your computer, the battery runs out or it crashes, then you have to open up that document again and rewrite it because you can't find it. And the first one took you like an hour and a half to really craft this perfectly worded thing, and then you have to do it again. and you do it in 5 minutes because it's all, you've already kind of figured out what you want to say, right? So it's the same sort of thing when we're painting a painting again. It just gets easier. Wow, okay, so this is Paula's version of the painting. Ah, very cool. So a totally different approach here, right? Same sort of composition. I imagine this one, probably Paula didn't have the benefit of using the transfer process to transfer the composition. So she's drawn it out on her own. I can't get the middle, okay. And I think it's actually really interesting to see how that same sort of picture appearing again. You know, when I was saying about May's kind of that diagonal in the background, I see that as well. Although it feels now a little bit different. I still feel like I'm higher up looking down, but now this area, to me anyway, now feels like a field or something in behind, right? So there's like a pond, and then I got to walk around here. So I don't really feel on this one that there's a slope on the other side. It kind of feels like I'm going to go down into a valley and I'm going to stay down there, or I'm on the top of a hill and I'm just coming down into that flat area. Some of those things, like when we're talking about, like when I'm saying like a valley on the other side, what we're essentially are these surfaces or planes, not airplanes, but like planes of a box, right? So we could say like a cube has, depending on what you see, might have, you know, let's say a plane here, and a plane here, these different intersecting planes, right? And we talk about that a lot more in the drawing course, which again is free, and you can watch it just like you've been watching any of these. They're on there on the channel. Oh, May says, I saw how everybody did the full tree, so I tried it again. Plus, I wanted to get more of the gradual landscape going up the hill. Great. So as I said, May, you definitely succeeded doing the second time. Like, what an improvement, right? That's super exciting. And I'm also like really proud of you for having the initiative and the courage and willingness to try it again. I think a lot of people, if you know, when they don't do something they're quite as happy, they just walk away and they're like, I'm done, right? To go to say, you know what, I'm going to try doing it again and I'm going to make it work, you know, is the rarity. I think most people are more likely to give up, so I'm really proud of you for having that tenacity. Okay, so here we're looking at Sharon's version of the painting. Wow, look at like this big tree. All of these trees, even though I can see a little bit of colors, so there's volume to it, so I see a little bit of the other parts of the tree maybe in behind. They feel like very solid, right? So this feels, you know, like these trees are much higher because they leave the top of the picture. I really feel like I'm in a bit more of an enclosed space, like walking through a forest, and rather than a more open space in some of the other paintings. Really cool. Yeah, I think this is great. Well done. Yeah, I love these trees. They look like, remind me of like fireworks. It feels a very joyous, cold painting. And then here's Shelley's version. Wow. So again, some of those browns remind me, you know, of Iris's painting here. And let me see. And Heidi's painting. Right? So there's that same, it was even a little bit of green coming through here. So this feels like maybe the temperatures are warming, right? It's either the beginning of fall and that first snow, or not the beginning, the end of fall and the first snow, or the end of winter and the beginning of spring here with that green and some of this brown kind of showing through. And where on earth did that go? Okay. Yeah, I love these little bits of snow right on these edges. That's great, right? That's the snow building up on all those places. Fantastic. Again, this reminds me a lot of Matisse as well, like the Fauve artist, Fauves. I've mentioned. We're going to talk about some of the other Fauve artists because Henri Matisse was the most famous of the Fauves, and the Fauves were kind of the rivals, if you want to think of it, to the Cubists. They were happening at the same time. Obviously, Cubism became way, 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 way more well-known, but the Fauves, at the time, were probably, at least at the beginning, seen as maybe more radical, because they often use much brighter colors. I like that a lot. I like the way that you've painted the trees, those very sharp points, right? It feels like we're really being drawn back towards this house. And, oh, cool. I feel like I had, I don't know, I guess this is, this here's Sue's painting here. And, yeah, that's great. Same, you know, it's a very similar thing. What I've mentioned a few with see how there's kind of a little bit the soft edges here, right? Like in here where we have like the brushes or the lines aren't hard lines. Like for instance, who are we talking about who had like really distinct lines? Right, like Iris here, right? So I think Iris has the most kind of sharp lines, and versus like Sue, you've got kind of some of those sharp lines, but they're also, there's a level of kind of softness to the way that they're painted. And oddly enough, both of them kind of remind me a little bit of Maud Lewis, even though they're kind of quite different. But, you know, like these, they're more suggestive, if that makes any sense. Like they're not as intense and graphic, let's say, as Iris is here. Not that there's anything wrong with either of them. I just think it's so interesting to see the differences between all of these. Yeah, and it's nice, these branches hanging over from above. And then, wow, look at Susan's. Wow, talk about like very graphic. And again, I don't mean graphic like violent graphic in terms of like graphic design. When we talk about graphic, it's more of like a drawing or illustration kind of term. So this almost looks like a print, right? Because the colors are so distinct, right? That is a really nice painting, Susan. Wow, that is really cool. I love the way that you built up all of these, the depth in here. I can't remember all your, it's been a while since I've looked at everyone's paintings, but I would definitely say this has got to be amongst one of your best paintings, Susan. That is really, I would love to see you try doing a painting like this, or taking the same maybe style and bring it on or towards another, or a photograph that you take. I think it'd be really cool to see that. There's also a little bit of like a Ted Harrison quality in here, who we're going to talk about in about a month from now. We're going to make a Ted Harrison painting, one of my favorite artists. They're all my favorite artists, but I grew up with some Ted Harrison prints when I was a kid, so I have extra fondness for him. Beautiful. I really like this. This is, I mean, I would say all of these are better than the one that I did, which is, that makes me really happy. You know, I'm sure there's some people who tune in and like, what a hack. But again, like I'm sort of the first person, you know, I don't know, running in, you know, like the first wave of people running over the trenches into the bullets. And you guys can kind of like, oh yeah, let's not go that direction, you know, let's find a little bit, we'll learn everything not to do just by watching him, and then we'll improve on what he's done. Right? Great job. Wow, everybody. Okay, so let's move on here to Vermeer. And I gotta say, these, oops, let's do this as one. This one, I kind of threw at everybody as a bit of a challenge. I was like, I wonder if even I can do a Vermeer painting in a couple of 2-3 hours, and is that possible? And then can I teach people how to do it? And seeing you guys do these paintings as well as they turned out has, for better or worse, given me license to try a little bit more complicated paintings, as we're going to see coming up in a few weeks. We're going to try a Leonardo da Vinci painting, and I don't imagine it'll be much more difficult than this one, but I think seeing how well everyone was able to do it makes me really excited to think about what we can do going forward. Anyway, Deborah's, actually, let's go to the opposite. We'll start here with Charmé on the other side here, and then we'll work our way back up to the top, so we're not, everyone gets their time. Yeah, so here's Charmé's version of Vermeer. That's really, I think there was a few versions. I can't remember, is this just the light, different photograph taken in different kind of lighting? I think. So this one looks like the lighting is maybe a little bit more even. Fantastic job. Look how nice and soft these transitions between, you know, some of the brightest areas and the darkest areas are. That is really, really nice. Not easy to do, as I'm sure everyone else kind of saw here. I'd be curious, this looks more like blending as opposed to glazing. And how did we do this one? I think we did glazing on this one. So it looks like maybe, Charmé, you took a little bit of a different approach to making this painting, but obviously you had great success doing it. So I'm really pleased with how this turned. This has definitely got to be exciting for you to see your ability to pull a painting like this off. Like, this is obviously one of the most famous paintings in art history, and to be able to do something that even approximates it in some way has got to be really exciting. So great job. I mean, I love all of this here. I love what's going on in her hat, or what would you call that? Headdress, or and the fact that we can see some of the underpainting and then the bright blue over top of it, that's really cool. Really nice. Great job. And then I think we've got a couple by Heidi. So I think Heidi painted 2 versions of it, am I right? Or altered it, so I have these 2. Let's make them a little bit bigger. Oops. So, again, or no, is that, yeah, I guess, huh, I think they're, oh, it looks like you did a little just work on the face. Is that, am I correct? It looks like the rest of the painting is, besides a few little marks elsewhere. And which one should, yeah, I think this one you've done more work on, and it definitely seems like it improved. I think, if I recall, I don't know what provoked you to want to do more, but I think one of the things is this eye over here looks a little bit bigger almost than this one, so it creates a slight bit of confusion. Whereas you went in and kind of just cleaned that up a little bit. And I don't think the eye changed shape at all. It's just that you got rid of a little bit of that dark area, which just draws more of our attention to it and makes it look bigger. Right? So I thought that was a really smart move on your part there. I love all of these colors and the shadows. I mean, I don't know if other people like this kind of stuff, but when I'm looking at paintings in museums, this, like, often it's the shadows that I'm looking at with other artists. I'm really interested to see how they describe the shadows and the life that they put in the shadows. And Vermeer and a lot of the other artists around this period of time using like really strong theatrical lighting and seeing how how they dealt with the darkness in the painting, right? Because we see a lot. I would say 50% of the painting is really, really dark, right? That's great. Again, what's really exciting is as people are getting better and better, more comfortable and more confident with painting, is you get to these places where you're like, there's a problem with the painting. I can see there's a problem with the painting, and I know what the problem is, and then I have some idea of how to fix it and make it better. Those are all like big, monumental achievements when it comes to learning about painting or art, or really if you think about anything, right? That when we first start out, we're making mistakes. We don't even know what's wrong, and we're just like, I don't know, I'm doing something wrong, or maybe even before that comes like, I'm just having fun, and then it's like, I want to get something, but I'm not able to get there. How do I? And then being able to kind of self-diagnose the issues in a painting, and then being able to solve them without my help or anybody else's help is like, that's, I think, ultimately where we all want to be, right? So, great job. Yeah, Heidi's, right? Now we'll look at Susan. Interesting, very different approach, right? So this one has more of a, what would I say? Like, there's an opaqueness to the way it's painted, which is a little bit different than some of the ways that we've... So, this is really interesting. Susan's painting was the final Anne Savage painting we just looked at. So it's so interesting to see that your same style being used to create this painting by Vermeer. So I still see, like, the opaqueness being like the paint is very solid, like not transparent at all, versus, let's say, Charmé, we see some of the layers below here, or even Heidi's, where is it? Yeah, where we see like over here, right? And we don't see that kind of quality at all in your painting. Again, there's no judgment one way or the other. It's just super interesting to see, like, you could almost imagine this being like a stained glass window, like, or a collage with colored paper. Like I could cut out these individual shapes and glue them together, right? You could make, like, this could be a pattern for, you could make a cake and you bake all those pieces and you stick them together or something with it, right? So it's very, just a different approach. I just think it's super interesting. There's an artist that this really reminds me of, and I can't think of who it is, but I love it. Great job, Susan. Very cool. And here's Sue. Here, this is Sue's painting on its own, and then here's Sue's painting with the girl with the pearl earring, the film in the background. I think that's really funny. I wonder, were you painting a little bit of this while watching? That is so funny. I gotta say, I think your painting looks better now. Seeing Scarlett Johansson in the background, I think your painting has done a better job. What's interesting about the way that Sue's painted this here is a little bit of the outlining with black. Why does it keep jumping? Which is something unlike, I think, anybody else, including myself or Vermeer, used. But I applaud your confidence and your courage to just go ahead and do it anyway, right? There's no rule saying you've got to do it one way and that's it. So I think it was really bold of you to go in, and maybe you felt you needed a little bit more definition in there and you included those lines in there. I think shows kind of like your real growing self-confidence as an artist to do that with this painting. That's really cool. I love these kind of shadows in here. I think maybe a little bit more or less definition in here. I would be sort of inclined to make that ear a little bit more in shadow, a little bit flat in this area, and sort of kind of bring a little bit more darkness into there. Otherwise, it's great. Very cool. And I love the photo with the movie. Wow, Shelley, that is great. This is really lovely. You know, like when I look at this, does it look like the original woman in the original painting? Not as much. Probably less than other people in the class did. But that doesn't mean that I don't think this is a really beautiful painting, right? It's like you've taken another actress, just like Scarlett Johansson. She doesn't quite look exactly like the original, the model that sat for Vermeer in that painting. But neither does yours. Yours, you know, she looks like a really beautiful. Like I could. I've seen people restaging. I mean, this painting is so famous. I've seen people dress up and for Halloween and take photographs of themselves posing as it. So this is almost like you dressed up as it. Somebody took your photograph and then you made a painting based on that. I really, really like the way that you've painted the face. Really nice, soft features, including this area with the nose. This takes a lot of courage to not define that nose. A lot of people would get really dark in here, where you've allowed this nose to kind of just blend into the rest of the face and just allow the nostrils to kind of tell us that it's a nose. And that's kind of scary. Like, you're really kind of, you are giving the viewer a lot of credit that they're going to be able to still see this as a face. So that's because in a photograph this happens all the time and we don't think twice, but in paintings there's a lot more. There's it's harder to allow a painting like this to live. Very cool, great job. So here's this. I think this is just the same one, right? Yep. And then let me see. Here's Sharon's version of the painting. You know, same sort of thing. Like, that nose is very subtle, right? This, who does this remind me of? This is, it has a little bit of like that Alex Katz quality, like simplified features, not really strong shadows. Like, we don't see the really strong shadows on her face that in the original painting that were there. But it doesn't bother me. I think it works really great. It's just a more, this is more of like almost an iconic kind of approach to the painting. Yeah, that is great. But yet the eyes, like, what's interesting, I think a number of people would have painted this same painting the same way, but then gone and done, who was it? Like Sue, and outlined a bunch of things. So it's super interesting. Sue's got this kind of the modeling around the face, and you've got all of that, the darkness, but then you did some outlining. Versus Sharon has kind of kept it very simple, but also kept these lines kind of a little bit indistinct, right? So, wow, that's just, the more I look at it, the more I like it. I think it takes a lot of courage to leave the painting in a state like this, where these features are not completely outlined. All right, very interesting. Good job, Sharon. Okay, and then we've got, wow, we've still got a bunch of these Vermeers here. So this is Peter's version. I think this is I think Peter also did two versions of this painting. So Here's the first one that Peter did and was not happy with this one, and then went and did another one. Now, this is, it's interesting to looking at the from the side, and we can see a little more of the texture of the painting. I love seeing some of these colors, like the green over top of the purple, and to get this shadow in here. I mean, obviously this one, the features are a little bit distorted, so the proportions are a little bit off. I also don't, it doesn't bother me too much. I think it's very unique, right? This one here, obviously, you really dialed in and got a little bit more of that rendering approach in here. I would wonder if you had any medium while you did, because some of this looks like a lot of dry brush, and so I'm wondering if you only had the water to mix with your paints, so you might have had a little bit of trouble doing some blending. That's maybe what some of this reminds me of. Which is, you know, one of the reasons why I didn't even introduce any mediums until really towards the very end, is I wanted to show people that you could do like a version, anyway, of any painting that exists with these relatively inexpensive paints. Obviously, to get closer and more accurate, we need a little bit more help with some different, you know, mediums and gels and things we can mix into the paint to get there, but we can get pretty darn close, right? Obviously, having some of those mediums make life a lot easier. When you're glazing or you're using the slow dry medium when we're doing portraits and stuff, make a world of difference if you're trying to get that more photographic, realistic look. There's plenty of artists who don't want that look at all and don't use those mediums, but this turned out great. Yeah, I think just a little bit of this looks like it just, we're maybe having a little bit of difficulty with the blending, so slow dry medium would probably have helped in some of those areas. And then, wow, look at May. That is cool. I love all the texture. Again, May, it looks like you use a lot. It looks like you have a lot of paint on your brush when you're painting, which is a little bit different than the way I paint, but there's nothing wrong with it. Especially if you're using your own paint, you can make them as thick as you like. But what I think is really nice is like places like this, where you put a little bit of that green into the shadow. That is super bold, and that shows like a real progression, because, you know, in faces anyway, you know, probably if you're looking at my own face, we could see green in like around my eyes and let's say on this side of my face, like just looking at, like, there's actually quite a lot of green on my face, because it's kind of like, you know, if we think of like the color wheel, right, and your skin tones are, you know, in this kind of area, right, green is right on the opposite. So we often use the opposite color on the color wheel for shadows, right? If you're painting an apple, we often use green and blue in the shadow, versus, let's say you're painting, what's something that's blue? I don't know, if you were painting a blue ball, you would probably think about putting a bit of orange into the shadow, right? So that makes me really excited to see May using those opposing colors in the shadow on the face. I don't even know if we even talked about that. But this is right out of Matisse, you know, is most famous for a painting of his called The Green Stripe, where he literally has a stripe of green right down the middle of a woman's face that he painted there, which is outrageous at the time. But if you really look closely, which painting kind of forces you to do, you see those things. It's just how much you want to emphasize or de-emphasize those things. Great job. This, again, May, like, if we go back to the first few paintings you did compared to where you are now, like, you've got to feel so excited about your, like, it's like gaining a superpower, isn't it? Right? It's like, wow, that's super excited to see how you've progressed. Great job. Really, really nice. Well done, May. And here's less. How many we have? 5 more, I think, here. very different version of the painting. So, I mean, I think the color, everything you've done in this painting is fantastic. You've captured that kind of theatrical lighting in here. One thing I would say is the face has a little bit too much white, like almost unmixed white, which gives the face a bit of a chalky kind of quality, like, and it almost looks like a little bit of like, what would you call, like makeup or something on the face. And I think, you know, some of these, and it's really tough. Like, this was not an easy challenge that I threw at you guys. So I think what I would do is you want to reserve some of that white. You only want to put it in a few places, right? And maybe a little bit on the nose, tips of the nose, a little bit on the cheeks and the chin, you know, a little bit on the forehead or the brow. But when we have too much of it, it goes from being highlights to looking like makeup, right? And you know, it's easier said than done, right? But it's once you kind of see and understand some of these things, what I would hope is people, when they get that kind of feedback, they're not like, it's just, oh, okay, now I know what to do next time, or now I know how I can fix this and make it a little bit better. Because I feel like if we look at this side of the face, in fact, can we zoom? Oops, here we are. We zoom in like this side of the face, I think you've done a really great job. In fact, I would even consider darkening this a bit in here. I like this, again, green and blue in there. It's just if we go to the other side, this is just a little bit too bright. But man, we're splitting hairs here because just being able to make a version of this painting that is just reasonably, like a reasonable facsimile, is a huge achievement. Great job, Les. Okay, Iris. Wow, cool. Very interesting. So, you know, again, if we go, what was it? Yes, okay, so Susan. So it's funny, Susan and Iris both have like that same sort of very opaque way of painting. Iris, just like Anne Savage, not quite as intense, but we still have a little bit of that kind of puzzle piece kind of quality, right? Very distinct lines and separating different shapes from one another. I think you have a little bit more softness than was it Susan had? If I go, yeah, Susan. But I think they both turn out really cool. I like this area in the shadow. I think that's super successful. Right down in here, in the hat. Again, what I love is being able to see these kind of colors through colors. Is one of the hallmarks, I think, of higher quality paintings. I mean, it's not the there are, you know, somebody could make a video showing 200,000 exceptions to that rule, but in general, it's I think anyway, when we see the colors mixing optically as opposed to everything being mixed on the palette, it makes it look more complex. Even to somebody who doesn't really know anything about art, they just look at it and be like, oh, that's so weird. There's yellow here underneath, but I don't see it until I look carefully at it. Right? So those are kind of I guess those techniques of the masters that we kind of unconsciously cue to. So that's great. Great job. Iris, or Irene, that's cool. Wow, very different. So this face looks a little bit different, right? We've got these eyes here. One thing I would say is it looks like we've lost a little bit of the shape of this face here. So I think this eye you know, this eye is closer to us, so it should be bigger than this one. And right now they're about the same size. I think, you know, this reminds me of the same thing that, who was it? I was dealing with, maybe it was Heidi, right? Heidi's first version and then second version. Just cleaning up that eye, I think, would help a lot. And then this nose has gone from kind of, it looks a little bit like it's bent out of shape a little bit. So, and this is tough. I'm not saying this is the hardest painting I think we perhaps did the entire time. But I feel like this nose and this eye need a little bit of extra love here. And this forehead, like if I was to paint this, what I would do is just go with some black and just kind of tighten this area around here and bring that cheek out. And then I would take this white on the nose and bring it back over here. It's almost like inverting this here. This dark piece has to go a little bit more on this side. But otherwise, there are, you know, when we look at faces, when we think of portraits, it's like if the eyes and the nose are a little bit off, then the whole rest of the thing kind of falls apart. I would not say that at all. I feel like, yeah, there's some things that we could do to improve this painting, but, you know, you still did like a great job on the rest of the painting. And you know, these are, you know, if we think of this whole thing, it's like as 100 units, these eyes account for like 4 units out of 100, right? So you've got like 95 other units that are working really, really well, just a few that need a little bit extra help, right? So, but otherwise, you know, again, this headdress, the shadows down here, I love what's happening here. Very believable folds in the fabric. Fantastic. Great job. And then Gail's version here, and I'm gonna start speeding up here. I know we're only on artist number 2 of 7, so but you guys have done such great work, so it's very hard for me to not want to talk about this fantastic work that you guys have sent me. So this looks great, Gail. This is really fantastic. I think we got this eyebrow here, which I don't remember being in the original. I think she almost had kind of like eyebrows that were shaved or painted over. So it's funny putting that in there. It makes it a little bit more contemporary, right? I think that's very funny. And it's a little bit of a raised eyebrow, which is it's kind of funny too. Yeah, great. Yeah, I don't know what else to say here. You've done a great job with the face here and these shadows. I love this. Looks like kind of, again, blues and grays in here, which are really important parts of that. Yeah, I don't know. I would say, I feel like this eye needs a little bit, the eyelid is a little bit too open. And just close that with just a little bit of this kind of a darker color and a lighter color right on top, and then boom. But otherwise, and yeah, that's what I'd say. Maybe the chin too is a little I might just kind of chisel that down so we don't have quite as prominent of a jaw. I mean, otherwise, I mean, it's fantastic. Who am I kidding here? Whoa, Dolores, that is outstanding. That is gorgeous. Wow, and look at the shadows and the folds. Beautiful. This headdress, fantastic, and the face, absolute home run. I love the reflection on her chin. Was it on this side here, where we see some of that, like the collar and reflecting onto her ear and jaw. Gorgeous. Great job. That is really, really well done. I mean, you've been doing really well throughout the whole time, but this has got to, again, feel really, really encouraging to be able to make a painting like that. Well done. That makes me super excited for you. I don't have anything really I can add and say. Yeah, that's really good. Wow. This is a very well done portrait. That's great. And then here Deborah on our final Vermeer painting to look at. Again, really cool. I think one thing that would what I love about this is the eyes seem to have gotten a little bit bigger, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, that's fine. I would say that we need a little bit more shadow on this side of the face. It looks, without, like, one thing shadows do is they help give volume and shape to things, right? Like if we just think of like a sphere, right? If we just have this as a white shape, it looks like a circle. When we start putting shadow on it, and even if you don't add a highlight, even, right? Highlights also do an additional, but the shadow makes it pop, makes it look a little more three-dimensional. So right now things look a little bit flat on this side, and a little bit more like in Dolores's here. If we add a little bit more on here, it's just going to give it a little bit more volume. But otherwise, I mean, everything's working really well on this side here. I would even make this a little bit darker. And this is quite a common thing, and I also deal with that same sort of thing myself all the time. Is like by adding shadow, you're taking a bit of a risk, right? Because you're defining things a little bit more. You're taking the risk that you could, quote unquote, ruin the painting by making it darker. But I would say 99 times out of 100, darkening those shadows improves the painting. Very rarely does it do anything really negative to the painting. Just looking at some of the comments. Wow. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, so everyone's just in the chat. They're just congratulating one another. That makes me super excited that there's so many people who are, giving each other positive feedback. Okay, so we're going to move on here to Takashi Murakami. Oops, let's try that again. So this is an episode that I'm eventually, let's try that again, going to not redo, but I filmed 4 additional, like 3-hour-long segments after we did this one, making t-shirts and more paintings. And so what I just need to do is kind of edit that all together into something that's not 12 hours long. I didn't want to, like, I have done other episodes in this course where I did one, and then I filmed another one later that day and live streamed that one. This one was one where kind of immediately after we finished that day, I was like, oh, this is like a whole course in and of itself. So and because a lot of it requires like time, waiting for things to dry, and really the longer you do let things dry, the better the results are. Because we were doing the photo transfer process for this, transferring it onto other canvases, and wood panels and clothes, right, or different kinds of fabric, and trying to do it in a couple of hours gets results, not the best results. I also tried this with about 7 end in the most satisfying way. Is I feel like it gave some people license to just go a little bit wild. So for instance here, Deborah has combined the Takashi Murakami with the Banksy painting, right? So we have the girl with the balloons from Banksy, and instead of balloons, she's holding onto these Murakami flowers, which I think is really fun. That's really cool. And I love the kind of the golden texture color in the background. That's fantastic. I think this worked really well. And the other thing I would say about like this whole process, the photo transfer process, is it's very difficult to make it look absolutely perfect. So we end up getting some of this, a little bit of a rougher kind of worn quality, which I know can frustrate some people who want it to be a little bit cleaner. I mean, if there are ways to do it cleaner, which you just basically just collage it directly rather than doing the photo transfer process. but I like that little bit grittier kind of a look. It just makes it look, it ages it a little bit, makes it look a little more worn and a little bit more personality, rather than just being transferred and looking pristine and clean. But that's just my approach and just my whole philosophy about painting anyway. Wow, this is cool. Here's May's version of Murakami. That's cool. So I wonder if you traced this and then painted, or did it transfer on top? Either way, the fact that you painted all of this by hand is not easy, but I bet you that was really helpful later on as you were going, because it just, having the patience to do all of these lines and to paint, you know, within the lines is not easy, but it is valuable exercise, right? You're developing those skills and really perfecting them, and I think it's paying off big time. So I really applaud you, May, for following through on this painting, despite my leaving this episode as a bit of a cliffhanger. That looks great, and I love the colors in here. Really cool. Oh, and you did another one too. That's cool. So this is the one that I was planning on painting that episode, which I never finished. And looks good too. All these overlapping shapes and colors, and keeping them distinct. Really well done. Not easy at all. Now here's Gemini Neil's painting. That's cool. Okay, what is going on here? How did we get these different looks? I wonder if they drew this out. That is what makes me think about what's happening here. So we have these figures on this side, and then these figures here, and there's sort of this area in between where things aren't going so well. Like, it almost looks like they're going down and then up, right? Doesn't it look like we've got a shadow and these fellows kind of falling off the edge? And this one, same sort of thing, but then they come back out okay on this side or something. I'm not sure, but that is really interesting. So I think it's so fun to take something recognizable like that and just run and play with it and see what happens. And I think it was quite bold of you to play with the colors in this way. Really interesting, very neat composition. I wonder, some of these I was like, oh, I would like to go back and figure out what, I want to go back and look at the Facebook page and see what the context for some of these. So here's Charmai's version of the Murakami, which, you know, again, doing all of this fine detailing. I think this one looks like it might have been hand-drawn maybe as well. Very cool. Great job. You know, again, I'm really proud of you guys for carrying through with this painting despite how it turned out. Yeah. Okay. So, we'll move on here to Artemisia Giantalesce. Okay. Let's try that again. Open as one. Okay. So this one was like the Vermeer, a painting that was definitely one of the more difficult paintings for I think most people to paint, and using a technique that is almost completely forgotten these days. Very, very few people use this technique or even have heard of it or know of it or seen it demonstrated. So it was fun for me to try it out with you guys, and the fact that so many of you actually did it, and you know, and had the courage also to share your results with me makes me really excited. I imagine very few of you will do this again, but I think it is helpful to at least have done it once, so that it's in the back of your mind, thinking that because we're essentially what we were doing is like the glazing process. Like we did a grisaille painting, a gray scale painting, and then we did some glazing over top of it. Now, I would imagine most people probably are not going to go back and do the same sort of approach, painting in gray and then glazing color over it again. But it might be helpful knowing how to do this. You can take the same technique and apply it elsewhere. Like if you were painting, let's say, hair. Hair would be a good place to use glaze anyway, so that if you're feeling a little bit, or even like in faces, painting reflections in cars, things that have kind of shinier surfaces lend themselves kind of well to glazing. But just kind of knowing how that works in the back of your mind, thinking, oh, you know what, I could fix this with a little glaze. That might help. So, and I think what I heard looking at the Facebook page, and I think even while we were painting, is a lot of people really liked, let's in fact just kind of go through these. A lot of people really liked their gray version and then felt that the color one, you know, wasn't as good, and maybe they wished they kept it gray. I heard some people saying, oh, I like it in gray. I don't know if I want to ruin it by painting it in color. So let me see, we're just going to go through these. This is so cool, makes me so happy. Wow. Okay, so I will start back at the top here. So this is Susan's painting. I think I have them a little bit out of order, but you know, again, I do think that the gray versions of these paintings turned out really, really well. And that's also just a whole other thing. Painting gray versions of paintings would be a really good learning experience. When I was in art school, we had a whole class where we just did this. We just took famous paintings and we just painted them as gray. We didn't do the whole glazing over top of it, because it's like taking black and white photographs. Like I taught a whole 20 episode intro to photography class. If you're interested, you could watch that as well. But one of the techniques that I talked about is just turning your camera to monochrome, right? Most cameras, even your smartphone, there's like a filter where you can set it to black and white mode and take photographs in black and white. And it really forces you to see the light and the dark, and to really think about how to compose your pictures in a much more focused way. Like when you don't have, because colors can be really distracting, and when you see things as black and white, all you really see is the shapes. And so traditionally artists would paint, or at least do a study in black and white, so they can really think about how to organize the composition effectively. And then afterwards, color is sort of like an afterthought. And it kind of stayed like that all the way up until Matisse was like the first one to really think about just going pure color. But anyway, if you're thinking like, I don't know what to paint, just opening up an art history textbook and trying to paint a painting that's in black and white. Some of those old art books, you know, that are in used bookstores that you buy dirt cheap because they're all in black and white images, you could just get a few of those from Salvation Army or whatever and open them up and make paintings based on some of those, because they're black and white photographs of color paintings. Would be a really, really great experience. I think you'd learn a lot from then making your own paintings. So anyway, let's, I think the other thing too is glazing is a slow process. So the fact that we were able to do the grisaille and then glaze over top of it in about 3 hours or so is pretty amazing. So usually we would probably spend several weeks working on something like that. That's why I only focused on her face in this image rather than the whole body. because there's just so much to do. But, you know, after you do that, then you could start building up, because I think even in my painting, it kind of looked a little bit like it needed more contrast. I needed to go darker, which I would have done. I would have kept building up these areas. So it's, how would you kind of explain this whole process? It's sort of like you paint it in the gray like this, and then you're like, okay, now I know where the brights and the darks are. Now I'm just going to paint over top of it with some, so now I know where the darkest browns are going to go and the lightest browns are going to go, etc., right? So I think if we just spent, if we did a whole nother episode and we just continued painting these paintings, they would get probably to the place you want them to get to. I mean, I just think they're fantastic. These look great. This is a great job, Susan. Really excited, you know, especially considering the way that some of the previous paintings you've made, which are more like these faceted shapes, right? And so here we have a little bit more of a blending technique that we're applying here. Those look great. Nothing to really say about them. That was fantastic. So let's look at Deborah's here. Very interesting. So I would say that's, I really liked your gray version, Deborah. But I would say this version is maybe more, well, I don't know. Both of them are really good. I was going to say this is one of the most effective of all of the colorized versions of the paintings people did. But I do, now that I look at the gray, I also like that. But I think one thing that makes it so effective is that you went darker, right? If you look at mine, my sky was still very baby blue. It could have used at least one more glaze on the sky to bring it to this little bit darker kind of place. And same thing with the shadows. So you did a great job adding this darker color in there. I think it worked really well. I mean, I think this is a common with everybody's painting, is including mine. We also lost a little bit of the shape in the jaw. So for a lot of people, the neck and the cheek kind of blend in together. And so that would just be a little bit more time spent building up some of the shadows in that area, right? So for many of us, that her jaw, the subject of this painting, kind of looks a little bit indistinct in this area. And so it's not a, you know, same sort of thing here with Susan. I think that'll be a common thing we'll see in everybody's painting, again, including my own. Wow, that's beautiful, Dolores. That is a gorgeous painting. That's got to feel very exciting. Look at the beautiful job you did modeling in these eyes. That is really, really fantastic. That's got to feel really exciting. And then this version you did over top is really beautiful too. I mean, I can imagine you might look at it and be like, I really like this. This is good. I think perhaps more of anyone, I think this might be the most successful job. And I think, again, it's because you went darker and darker and darker. I think you could even still go a little bit darker down in here, right? Just bringing out those, but I wouldn't encourage you to maybe do more on this painting. I think it's great to continue moving forward, but the hair turned out really nice. Like, think about these very delicate light glazes over. See how it just sort of makes the hair look, rather than one big block in like a helmet, it starts to have that, like how, even though there's this, like how to describe, so like these areas right here, where it's neither the background nor the hair, the main body of the hair, we have these little areas here. The effect that creates is it looks like one or two strands of hair as opposed to a big clump of hair. But you haven't painted one or two strands of hair. You just got this kind of like very light shape over top. So it creates a slightly kind of fuzziness that makes it look like we see more of the skin or the background behind it, right? So it's like you're describing the look of one or two hairs without painting one or two hairs, right? So we have, let's say, 30 hairs right here, and then one hair popping out. I don't know how to really fully describe that sensation of looking at it that way, but anyway. So I think that's really super effective. Gales here. Wow, that's cool. Great job. I love how dark and we really went darker on here. That's great with that hair. I think we could also still go just a little bit darker under here, and that would help. And, you know, in this process, we sometimes lose a little bit of the definition. So I think I can see that there were some really nice grays. I'd be interested to see what it looked like before you put the color on here. But, so we've lost a little bit of those qualities. But I mean, again, it's probably the first time, I think this is the first time we did any glazing. Or maybe we did that in the Vermeer. I think that's where we first did some glazing. So it's not uncommon to using a technique for the first time to find it a little bit difficult, right? Here's Heidi's version. Great. Oops, where did we go? Heidi, there you are. Again, this is more similar to mine, very like subtle effect. But if we think, just like what I was saying about Dolores and like the kind of fuzziness here, where this hair just sort of, without blending it into the background, it just sort of fades into the background as hair might, right? When we have a big body of hair, just a few extra hairs poking out. So that worked out really, really well. Great addition of these warm kind of colors on the cheek to kind of lighten it up a little bit. Great job. And then we have Irene. This is the black and white version. And the color. That is super interesting to see these. Wow, very different. I love how in this one, you've got all these kind of patterns in here. And the eyes are really distinct. And then this version, when you painted over top of it, softened up some of that kind of very graphic nature of the face. So that's very interesting. I really like the way, it's also, what I see you've done is changed the eyes a little bit. Like these eyes were quite big. If we look at, we had this eye kind of literally kind of poking out over the side of I guess this hair would be going. So there's a little confusion as to what's happening here. It's almost like this hair is going in behind the eye or something. And then it looks like you noticed that issue and corrected it when you put the color on, which is great, right? If you can spot the problem and then fix it, then that's really important. Here's May's version, the same thing. So I love that you made this darker here too. I would even make this underneath here a little bit darker. Great job with the glazing. Fantastic, great job. Is there some slight kind of proportional problems with the face? Sure, but I think what's most important is if you can come away understanding the technique, then it doesn't really matter what the face looks like. We could just be painting like a shoe or like a coffee mug, and if you're understanding the process, then that's what I would hope you would take away from this painting. If you paint it again, I'm sure you do a much better job, but really, really nice job on the glazing, particularly on the hair and on the skin on the face. Really, really excited for you. Great job. Now here's Paula's version of the painting. Very, very different than everyone else's. We've got the much more vertical and a little bit kind of squished. This reminds me a lot of those. It's been 20 years since I've thought of it, but there were these, I remember National Geographic of portraits from Egypt that, because when we think of like Egyptian, I could sit here looking for it, but there are, when we think of like Egyptian paintings, we think a lot of like these very stylized kind of poses, right? And there was like a period in Egyptian art where people did like very realistic paintings of faces. I can't remember. Anyway, this is what it really reminds me of, is that particular moment in art history that was sort of forgotten. And even the same sort of colors. I feel like these colors might be a little bit off just the way it's photographed. But I think this is also, I think Paula, in the same with Anne Savage, you also didn't print out and transfer the image, so you just had the courage just to paint this painting without those guidelines, which I think is very bold. That makes me really excited that you just wanted to paint the painting so badly that you just did it, and you drew it and then you painted over top of it. Not easy at all. So that's really impressive. I'm really proud of you for going ahead and doing that. And let's see, we got a bunch more here. So I'm gonna move a little bit faster. My apologies to everybody here, but we got, so Peter, I like that Peter included kind of the stages of the painting. So here's your gray. Here's where he started adding a little bit of color, I think maybe just into the background, and then the glaze over top of everything. Very, very nice job. I think you could have gone a little bit closer to the hair with this darker blue. Although having said that, there is something kind of nice about this kind of bit of a halo or aura that's created, where we have that kind of glowing kind of look. And it kind of reminds me of like the Kate Graham painting we did at the very, very end, where we used that to make it look like the stars were radiating light, right? Same sort of thing too in the star. That's great. Really nice. Great job. Great, great. And here's Sharon. Here's the black and white version Sharon did, and then the color. Very interesting. And it looks like the eyes changed also just a little bit as you were painting them. Interesting. I don't know what, again, which one do I like better? I mean, I think that that is really nice. I do like the way it turned out in color. I like that you were really bold with these bright blue eyes. I think that worked really well. I would say that the white of the eyes is a little bit too white. Very rarely are eyes white like that. You might see the highlight of the eyes being that white, but I would just tone that down a little bit, add a little bit more gray to it. That worked really well. Yeah, it was great. I love the way you did this hair. This looks like really cool braids or something going along here. And not easy, obviously, to do. Shelley's version, I recall Shelley began with the full figure to paint this. So the fact that you painted this whole thing, and it looks like you sketched it out as well in the same way that Paula did. And so just drawing this complicated painting and painting it is really exciting, really well done. And then you glazed over top of it, so we have the original. Wow, great. You know, I mean, this is really nice. I love the way you did these hands. This reminds me a lot of like Picasso, the way that he painted, especially kind of his blue period. You did a really good job here. And in fact, right here, this version, this arm looks a little bit awkward. It's sort of like it doesn't quite connect to the rest of the body here, but when you did your color version, you fixed that issue, right? Now you connected it really well, and now it's all believable. So again, if a big part of being an artist is being able to evaluate your own artwork and not just be like, it's bad, I don't like it, or it's great, I love it, I'm a genius. But to be able to look at it and go, oh, I see what's wrong. I just need to change this a little bit, and I'll fix it, and then it'll work. And that's, you know, again, easier said than done, and it can take people decades to get to that point. But part of it is just being honest with yourself and taking some time to kind of learn a little bit about other artists and just being objective about your work, really. And here's Charmai's version. I think Charmay decided just to keep it in black and white, if I recall. So this looks great. Oh, it's interesting too. Little changes here into the eye. I think that really helped. Yeah, and then you put a little just gray over top. Well done. Yeah, and what else can I say about any of these? They're just fantastic. Wow. Okay. So the next few paintings of Damien Hirst and Helen Frankenthaler were, you know, let's do this all as one. For me, there was a few times where I was a little bit confused as to which artist was which, right? Just because we kind of had some fun getting pretty messy and wild with these two artists. So forgive me if I put them in the wrong category here, but I think we'll talk about them all within the next 10 minutes anyway. So here's Deborah's version, which I loved. I think Deborah put these up on the Facebook group maybe an hour or two before we actually did the class. So it's really interesting to see this solution that she had to have like a small dish and fill it up with just a little bit of water, because I remember I tried doing this and I put way too much water and it just splashed all over the place. So just a thin film of water worked really well. And then to putting like a little Tupperware container over top of it. I think that just that little bit of water helps just get rid of like if it's just sitting plastic to plastic, there's a lot of friction. That water allows it to spin a little bit easier. And then Deborah taped canvas to the top of this Tupperware container to make a really cool homemade spin machine. I love this. And look at the results. Look how cool that is. I wonder what you're painting on there. That's a nice little, either a canvas or a piece of wood or like a, what do you call that? Kind of like a coaster for like a in the kitchen for pots and pans, whatever those things. I can't, you know. But that's cool. I like that. Turned out really nice. That was a great spin. And it's amazing that you could create this kind of quality of artwork in just like with these all homemade kind of setup. That's really fantastic. Makes me super excited. Oh yeah, so this is what that is. I was right. It is a kind of a coaster. Yeah, cork coaster. Okay. Great. Yeah. And I love that how you were able to, you got everything ready. You put the plastic down to keep the mess down low. And then these are them drying or after they dried. So it looks like this one was probably water and paint maybe without any medium. And so it makes much more like a watercolor effect, right? It's less like painting and more staining, right? Which I think creates these are beautiful effects. Like I could see this being like a really nice style for like a set of cards, like if you're making your own Christmas cards and stuff. That looks really kind of cool. I really like because there's like that color, and I got something similar on one of my spins too, where I just used water in there, and it really creates just there's like a softness to that's very hard to get otherwise, right? So these turn out really great. And I see Sandra just joined us from Los Angeles. Hi, Sandra. Wow, let's get here. Donna's version of the Damien Hirst painting. Very wild. That is beautiful. That is really nice. I love how these colors just shoot out from the center. That is really cool. So these combinations of very different colors like green and red and blue, right? So we get that high contrast, helps us get a lot of these really neat shapes in there, or just more visible. And here's Donna did it again, although this looks like this one is maybe using a stick rather than the spinning process to get that explosion pattern, right? So it's nice to see them kind of back to back, using the device to spin or kind of faking it. They both kind of get similar results but different, right? Which one is better at it? I mean, I don't know, it's up to you. But it's fun to kind of, once we know how to manipulate the paint, then it's like, okay, well, what sort of effect do we want to do? And we can kind of use different techniques to get different effects. Okay, and here's, I think, Heidi. I think did I spell it as Haida or Heidi? I'm pretty sure it's Heidi, right? Wow, that is crazy. What does this remind me of? Oh, this is going to drive me nuts. Whose paintings does this remind me of? This reminds me of, it'll come to me. But these colors remind me a lot of like old art history books, color plates that are in those, if you like really old art history books where like they're literally printed on different pieces of paper and glued into the books. That's what these colors remind me of. I don't know if that's how it actually looked in person, but just in terms of this image, it really has that look. Like even like William Blake paintings, even though again his paintings they're representational, but this is a really interesting combination of colors. And May's version. Now again, I don't know if this is Damien Hirst or Helen Frankenthaler that we were doing here, but these turned out great. Like this looks like, you know, from a science fiction movie or something. The end of 2001: The Space Odyssey, where all those colors are just shooting all over the place. I love all these swirls, and that turned out really cool. Wow, great job. And it's fun to see them on the screen like this. And here's Peter's version. Cool. Love these combos of colors. Like, wow, it's like a pop art explosion. That turned out really neat. What's kind of neat about this is how little mixing the color did. So the colors are very distinct. I'd be curious to know how you got this effect, Peter, because I think for a lot of us, when we did this, the colors mixed a lot, whereas yours, the colors stayed fairly distinct. So that is what's, you know, makes me, I'm really curious. I mean, it could be different combinations of paint, different brands of paint, different additives or not adding to it, you know. Here's Shelley. Shelley's got a whole bunch here. How she also created, looks like a system to make these paintings. So I think we show here, the next one is, I don't know, maybe some kind of lazy Susan attached to a bale of wire, right? I'm not sure how they spun. But then, and this is a mixing cup, I think, is that what I'm looking at? And then there's the pour. And then we've got the little, but here's where we see the results after a spin, the paint going everywhere, which I love. Sometimes these can be more interesting than the painting itself. One thing that I've done is when we do the spin, like you saw me where I was laying down, I had the drill and this paint was splattering all over the place. One thing I've done is we got t-shirts and just kind of put them on coat hangers and lined the inside of that ring or whatever you want to call it and did the spin, and then afterwards everyone's got these t-shirts with like splatters all over them and they look really cool. I keep thinking like one day I'm just gonna take all my clothes out of and just put splatters on them this way, because you get like just such interesting like there's just no other way to get that kind of effect than without doing that spin look. And here's a couple more from Shelley. That's great. So like, I mean, like look at the difference between Shelley's version and Peter's version here, right? So almost the same colors, but you know, Shelley's really mixed here versus Peter's stayed relatively distinct colors. Well, I don't know why one, I mean, it's all chemistry really, right? So there's another one, I think. Yeah, this is another one by Shelley. Wow. That is wild. So that's one by Shelley. Let's see. And here's one by May and Heidi. All right, so crazy wildness going on here. I love these. I mean, these they just seem like photos from outer space or something, right? Or of from underneath the ocean or inside of a microscope, you know, worlds into themselves. That's really cool. Okay, and Sue here. Wow, I love this mess. That's great. So we have like this bin, like a plastic bin, and then you got like a spinning mechanism, and then maybe you used a coaster as well. Huh. These look great though. Look at that. That is really nice. Right, these would be, you know, there's so many options. Like once you learn these different techniques, like you could create your own coasters and give them to people as gifts. You can do this like this is almost like doing tie-dye, but giving it a twist on tie-dye, right? So rather than, I mean, I won't explain how tie-dye works, but you could just take a t-shirt and wrap it around like a big circular shape and spin it and put paint on the t-shirt. Obviously, I'd put something in between the t-shirt so that the t-shirt doesn't stick together and you can actually open it up and wear it like a t-shirt. Fantastic. Okay, so I got to keep on plowing ahead here. Okay, so let's look at Helen Frankenthaler. One at a time. Okay. So here, why don't we start at the bottom again? Okay, so here's Sharon's, and again, there might be some overlap. I might even have the same pictures from the same people in Damien Hirst and Helen Frankenthaler, which, so here we have Sharon's version, and, oh, is it Sharon or Shelley? I can't remember now. We just looked at this one, but I think I've attributed it to two different people. Anyway, my apologies for that. Wow, look at these. Again, you know, obviously the attraction to doing this pouring of paint is you have to give up control, right? When you do this kind of a thing, I mean, there's no way that one would set out to make a painting like this. And even if you did set out to paint it like this, it probably wouldn't turn out like this, right? So I think that's one of the exciting things of using this process is you have to give up so much control and kind of accept the chance occurrences happening that are going to create something new and unexpected. And for some people, that's a really hard thing to let go of. Like they really want things to, they want to know what they're going to create from the very beginning. They don't want it to be surprised at the end. And there's some other people who have a very different perspective on that. And they're like, oh, why would I want to paint this Vermeer painting if I know this is what I'm going to get? And I'm probably not going to do as good a job of painting Vermeer, so this is just going to be an exercise in, like, you know, I'm just going to humiliate myself and embarrass myself because I'm certainly not going to do that. So there's certain people who feel that way, and then painting like this, where like, wow, it's going to turn into some craziness, and maybe it's going to be bad, maybe it's going to be good, but I'm going to take that chance. So I think what's really important is just by trying these different things is you sometimes surprise yourself because you're like, you know what, I didn't think I would like this, and I really discovered that this is kind of fun. And then I'm sure there's some other people like, oh yeah, I'm definitely never doing that again, right? And I'm sure if I asked everyone which paintings you enjoyed the most, we would have very, very different reactions. So that's why I wanted to have as much diversity of techniques and styles as possible. That's cool. I love this texture, these globs. I realized subsequently that the white that I've been using from one of these, here it is. I think it was like this cheap brand from Michael's. I think the rest of the colors that you can get, this Artist Loft brand from Michael's, all the other colors work really well, but the white When I use this in the spin and pouring paintings, it just like basically curdles, and we get that real kind of chunky quality in that you saw in maybe mine when I was doing mine. I've since, as I said, just like the Damien Hirst and the Takashi Murakami, I also filmed like another 3 hours or 3 sessions of doing pour paintings afterwards. So I have I need to edit another video, another 9 hours of results that I got from that. But that was one of the things I discovered, is that that this did not help. And again, it's all chemistry. We're adding all these different additives. We're spinning, and when we use so like for instance, I didn't use this in the class when I was teaching it. I used it in the other ones subsequently, and this material is often used by people when they're doing the paint pouring process. And this isn't, when you buy this material, you buy it because it's going to help, when you're painting your house, get really nice brush strokes, and it makes it just a little bit easier. Of course, people are basically using it incorrectly to get cells in their painting. It's definitely not something the manufacturer, when they created that material, was expecting or even wanted people to do. But people just playing around different materials found it, like, whoa, this creates really cool cells. Like, let's use this to make paintings like this, right? I just find that super fascinating. It's people making a mistake, using the materials wrong, which creates something very cool, right? So every time you think you're doing something wrong and you're failing, I remember I had a teacher in art school who, how did he put it? It was like, what art, he put it so well that it's always stuck in my mind. The idea is that really what art is about is sort of challenging how open we are to receiving new ideas. That like good art is always challenging us, like, can you accept this? Can you really accept this as art? And most people are like, no, ooh, even when you're making, like, I don't know. So art is about sort of like that thing that you create, you're like, oh, that's garbage, that's awful, it's shameful, it's bad, it's wrong, is can you put your mind in a position where you can look at it and go, there's some interesting things that happen in this painting. Maybe it didn't turn out the way, or it certainly didn't turn out the way I wanted, but there's some actual, like, really good stuff happening. And that's a really hard mental leap for people to make, is to be able to see the positives out of what might otherwise be a complete mess, right? So, and that's how we got into this whole paint pouring process to begin with, right? It probably Jackson Pollock dripping paint on the floor, or he was painting something else, and like, oh, the floor is more interesting than my painting. And then, what if I dribble a little bit? Whoa, I just discovered, and Helen Frankenthaler, she's probably painting on the wall, and then she's got these big buckets of paint, and then spills some onto maybe a canvas was on the floor. Like, whoa, what if I pour paint on there, right? Doing it wrong made it right. Okay, so let's continue here. Here's Peter's versions of these paintings. Wow, cool job, Peter. I love this. Look at those gorgeous colors. That's fantastic. Really, really nice. And like, whoa, talk about a different painting. There's 2 different ones, right? I'd be certainly interested to know how you got these. I wonder if what you can do is sort of take a brush or anything and kind of make little lines on it, and that might be how you got these little bit of a zigzag patterns, or you shook the canvas. Either way, this created a really cool look, and 2 very different paintings. Again, I wonder what the oh, okay, so here's the other one right above it. Okay, I was going to say, is it the same painting you adjusted? But very cool. And, you know, I'm going to save your other one, Peter, until the very end, because I think it'll be really interesting for people to see that one. So here's Heidi's version here. This looks like we've painted and then kind of done this kind of scrape or drawing process over top of it. Could try to get some cells, which didn't happen, but I still think this looks kind of cool. Right? There is like, what does it remind me of? There's something like, well, it reminds me of a German artist called Gerhard Richter, and there's a really great movie called Gerhard Richter Painting, which I think might be on Netflix. You can watch. Is what this German artist. He's still alive today. He's probably in his 70s. He's one of the most. He makes paintings that look just like this in his studio that sell for like $10 million each. And it's funny because there's interviews with him. And he gets a lot of that money. He's doing pretty well, but he's just like, I don't know why people spend this much money on my paintings. I mean, I don't mind it, it's great, but I do think there's probably better ways you could spend your money. It's really funny because he's kind of like, people are insane. I don't know why people spend $20 million on my paintings. Like they look like and he shows him, they're large paintings, he's got a big squeegee, he's doing this stuff on it. Anyway, let's move on here. Here's Dolores's version. Wow, look at that. That is cool. What an interesting, you know, this sort of reminds me of like the surface of Jupiter, right? If you've seen photographs of the big spot and that's swirling on the surface. Very cool. And wow, totally different one. This one looks like a combination of manipulating the paint a little bit. Very neat. I love these colors. Wow, that is wild. And here's another one by Dolores. Wow, I love how you're really experimenting here. This makes me really excited. The more you experiment with the materials, the more familiar you get with them, and the more, when those accidents happen, like Bob Ross is talking about, the less upset you are, and the more you're like, wow, look at all the potential here to create something neat. Wow, very different. It looks like, so I get the feeling when Dolores, you're doing this, you're sort of adding different levels of water or different kinds of medium in there, different thicknesses of paint, and then pouring them, and you're getting very, very different results. Like these blues, is that from below, or are you scraping that away, or those little drops of blue? Who knows? But right, you can create such interesting effects. Like, whoa, wow, that's neat. It's neat seeing, like, obviously these would be very different in person, and we'd be able to see, or we'd have better clues as to what is on top of what. But what's kind of fun is when we look at these online, it's like, I have no idea how it was made, so it's just kind of fun just looking at them just purely from a formal point of view. And then here's, this was the one in the thumbnail that I did right at the very end of the class. And we have a lot of this texture here, and we've kind of faked out the look of the linen that she was painting on. Great job. Or this is Deborah's now. Sorry, Deborah. Very cool, Deborah. And then likewise, Deborah's got a bunch here, and there's two of each. So I think one might be the original when it's wet. I think this is wet. And then I think this is after it dried, I believe, because we can see, you know, like when the paint is wet, it is often appears to be thicker and often a little bit brighter, more colorful. And then when it dries, when the water evaporates from it, it tends to kind of thin down, and so we see a little bit more of the texture of the canvas. And the colors maybe are not quite as bright, which is why a lot of people will put like a gloss varnish over their painting when they're done, because it makes it look wet again and brings out the brightness of the saturation of the colors and makes the blacks look blacker, right? It tends to create a little more depth. So, you know, one thing you could do if you wanted just to experiment, and let's say you made a bunch of paintings like this, and you're like, ah, that was a waste of time. It's not, if you think of it as an opportunity to, you could then even paint over top of these or just do some tests to it. So for instance, let's see, like you could take, let's say the gloss glazing liquid, and you could, or gloss medium, anything that's sort of glossy, and there's gloss varnish, you can get them in a spray can and you can spray it over the surface rather than painting it. But any type of gloss that you put onto your painting afterwards, or even mix into the paint itself, is going to give it more of that wet quality. So often acrylic paint looks, people are always like, oh, I love my paint when I'm making an acrylic painting, and then afterwards they're like, oh, I left it overnight and it just looks not as good as I remember it yesterday, because as it dried, it got a little bit duller, right? It looks more matte. Personally, I like that look, but I'd say I'm definitely in the minority. Most people want it to be shiny, reflective, because often in museums, most paintings that are in museums have been varnished, right? Traditionally, ours would be painting on oil paint, and then they'd varnish over it to protect the surface from dust and, you know, splatters from the kitchen, or kids drawing on it, or people spitting on it, or, you know, whatever else could get on a painting. So varnish, the thing with the varnish too is varnish can be cleaned by conservators. They can, so often when you see a painting being conserved by conservators in a museum, or fixed or touched up, the first thing they do is they remove the existing varnish off the surface, and then they get to the original paint itself, and then they can do things to that. Or another technique is a lot of conservators will take off the varnish that existed before, put a new varnish over top of it, and then do any kind of alterations or fixing of that surface onto that surface, so that in the future someone could remove that varnish and all those additions and get right back to the original painting, right? So that you're not altering the actual original surface of the paint. Why am I even talking about? Anyway, but you could take a brush and let's say just varnish over half of this, or put a gloss medium or gloss glaze over half of the painting, even to the Murakami ones like the photo transfer, and you'll see that the colors pop back up again. If you're like, oh, it looks too cloudy, little bit of gloss, when it dries, poof, and you might be pleasantly surprised again. Deborah says, I ended up putting Mod Podge on it, and I imagine that really made a big difference, right? Especially if it was gloss, it would bring out those colors. So this, again, I think that's so this is the wet version of Deborah's painting, and here's the dry version. So, you know, one of the things you can notice, I know this is a little bit out of focus, but you can see, you know, the texture of the canvas coming back in once it's dried, right? Do you like that? Do you not like that? Obviously, there's lots of different ways that you can counteract that, right? That tells me there's probably a lot of water in the original, and then when it dried, all that water evaporated and it's settled down quite a lot. So you could add pouring medium. So for instance, this is the opposite. So here, I think that's the wet version where it's gooey and wet. And here's after it dried. And one of the things we have happening here is some kind of like the shrinking of the paint is causing all of these kind of weird wrinkles in there. Do you like that? Do you not like that? I don't know. I think all those things are really kind of cool. It's like the paint is like alive, right? It's the top surface dried first, and then there was a lot of paint underneath that was still wet, and as it dried, it shrank and then caused that top surface to wrinkle. And some artists use that to their benefit. So this is really cool. You got some really nice, beautiful cells in this painting. Great job. Oh, and I was going to mention, so here, just to finish off these here, this is Peter's version. So he took this process of the paint pouring and used it to create an image. Now, I'm not sure exactly how you did this, Peter. if you used tape. You might have, looks like perhaps you used tape in order to kind of get these kind of sharp edges, or perhaps you painted over top of it afterwards with black. Might have been tape or some kind of a stencil. But either way, I think this is a good, it's a good way to kind of wrap up this Helen Frankenthaler series of paintings, because I can imagine a bunch of people did that process and were like, okay, that was fun. It was a good kind of a break, and it was pretty silly. But, you know, like, when would I ever honestly actually make a painting like this? Like, seriously, this is like... Whereas I think what's nice about what Peter's done is shown us all is this is a technique just like glazing or photo transfer that is not exclusive for one style of painting, right? We can use, like, you could do let's say you take your Vermeer painting. You're not happy with the face even of the Vermeer or the hair. You could do, like, you could tape off part of that and pour paint on it, and then afterwards you peel it off and you have like this crazy face that has got all these swirls all over it, and then you could paint the eyes back in, but it just shows you that you could do that with hair. Like there's a couple of very famous images of Bob Dylan, a poster by, what's his name? Like the most famous illustrator. Anyway, but a silhouette of his face, and then his hair is all wild, right? So you could think of, like, that could be a really fun version of this to make. Let's say even just take a photograph of somebody, right? Of maybe yourself, and so you've got your face, but you pour paint for your hair and give yourself this really crazy wild hair kind of a look. It would be weird, it would be strange, but it would be also totally new and original and different. And a lot of people would look at it and be like, wow, that is a really interesting way of making a portrait, right? So very good. I'm really proud of you, Peter, for doing this. And this wasn't something I thought of, but now having seen it, I'm like, yes, that would be something very fun, because I think it makes it seem, it brings it back into the practical realm of possibilities. Okay, so we have one more artist. We've got Kate Graham that I want to talk about. I think I want to save her for the very end, and I want to just talk about the artworks that you guys have sent in, because you guys are like little machines. They're cranking out new art all the time. So I want to share some of the paints, and we'll end on Kate Graham's artwork, because that's kind of the way I always intended it to be anyway. So let's look at this. I'm not sure what the title of this painting was, Heidi, but I think this was based on another artist or teacher online that she was watching, and this was, I think that was, anyway, in the Facebook description. So, but it is a very funny painting. I think there was a commercial. The reason why I titled it 2020 is there was some commercial on TV. I think it was by Ryan Reynolds, the one of like somebody. If 2020 was a person that was trying to use a dating app, it would date the devil and all the kind of hijinks they would get up to. But this is a very funny, super bizarre painting. I love it. When I'm teaching my students at Emily Carr, I'm always saying, let your paintings get weird. Let's see your personality. Like, don't be afraid to like, my favorite when I'm making a painting, and my wife can attest to this, like when I'm drawing and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And I'm like laughing to myself as I'm painting something. That's my favorite, because I'm kind of out of my comfort zone. I don't know what's happening anymore. And it's like, it's like being in the movie theater watching a movie, and you're like, and you don't know what's going to happen next. Like that's the feeling I like best when I'm making a painting is I'm like, oh, I don't know, this is crazy. What have I created? What am I doing? This is like, Michael, this is like, I love that experience. And it's like you're on a horse that's just racing and you're just trying to hold on because you're like, where are we gonna go? Okay, so here's Sharon's painting here. Cool. I think she said this is her first abstract painting. I love your really nice signature too. That's fun. That must have been a fun painting to make, right? So again, like imagine taking one of the Helen Frankenthaler pouring paintings we did, right? Where you just pour paintings, and again, I'm sure some people are like, oh, I don't know, this is just, it's cool, I get, like my wife is like, she's like, because I had them all upstairs after class and we were looking, she's like, they look nice, but like, I don't really like any of them, right? So but imagine you took one of those paintings and then tried to make a painting based on it, or you're to look at it and say, oh, let's imagine this is space or underwater, and I'm going to try to recreate some of those flowing shapes and lines and create an abstract painting based on it, and just use it as like a starting place for a composition. I think this is great. Really cool. I'm really proud of you, Sharon, especially for painting so big. One thing I would say is it might be helpful to try using another brush in here. So it looks like we've got kind of a wide brush that you did most of this painting on. I would suggest adding a smaller brush and maybe even a wider brush. It's always good to have 2 or 3 brushes when you're making a painting, and to try to think about using all 3 of them so that you don't just use one brush to make the whole painting. And I'm sure that there's somebody else on YouTube who's got a totally different philosophy on this. It's just I'm just telling you things that other teachers have taught me, is that because I think one thing that happens is when we work on, let's say, a small canvas, we might have like one brush that we use a lot for small canvases, and then we think, okay, I'm gonna get a bigger canvas and I got a much bigger surface, now I need a bigger brush, and then I got a bigger one, so now I need it, and so all the tools just keep getting bigger. And one thing to think about is, even if you're painting on a larger canvas, it doesn't mean you're now going to do everything with a big brush. You might still want to do with a smaller brush and kind of adding a few smaller thin lines in here. I really love all the colors in here. I think this black though feels a little bit heavy and dark. Like if this was more like an eggplant, like a purple, I think, even though you do have some purple in here, it might integrate with some of the other colors a little bit more. But again, that could just be the photograph and not being able to see the color that's actually in there. This is a painting that Irene sent in here, again, from another class that they were doing online, but made this painting and said that it brought them a lot of happiness and made them laugh looking at this, which I agree. It's very funny. We had this like coffee cup, big coffee cup. It's like, imagine having a coffee cup that big, right? Where you're like, whoa. I personally, like, I love big mugs. You know, I often, people buy me like little mugs, and I'm like, that's great. I'll finish that in 2 sips. I need like a big coffee cup, or I'm a big tea drinker. So this is fun. You know, if you're making a paint, like, I mean, are there some, you know, like this handle looks a little bit awkward. You know, the cup, right? Could be like a little bit more symmetrical kind of oval shape. So but does that make it wrong, or does it make it bad? Like, we have a past 100 years of modern art where artists deliberately made things that were awkward because they you know, it's like one of those things, like, you know, so Picasso or Matisse or Frida Kahlo just like ignored the rules of what is right and wrong because they figured, like, photography got that whole area covered anymore. Now we can use our imaginations to be super expressive and do whatever we want. It doesn't have to be tied to reality anymore. So that is really cool. I think that's fantastic. Here, this is from our drawing class that we did. That Charmaine is taking the drawing class. Now this is a drawing of my daughter, Edie, and that we did in that class. And I think you've done a better job than I did, because my own drawing of my own daughter was a little bit awkward. But again, at the end, I can look at it and go like, oh, this is where I made some of the mistakes, and this is how I would fix it. And I think all the drawings I've seen subsequently, people have done a better drawing than me because they were learning from my own mistakes. Now, Donna sent in this picture before, but she's done a little bit more additions here and added some, I think, shadows to the gecko itself, which weren't there before. So integrates it a little bit more with the rocks, which I think were really well done before. I mentioned how I thought awesome this was before, and she's subsequently done a little bit more work on it. I think it's great. I mean, I don't know if it needed any more work. I mean, I think what you've done is basically kind of outlined around here to create these shadows. I would say, if you're thinking about doing, like right now, the shadows are outlining the whole thing. One thing you might want to think about when you're adding shadows is to have the shadows really on mostly one side. So you kind of decide where the light is hitting it. It could be from the top or bottom, sides, or wherever. And just have, so let's say, rather than shadows up here, we might, or I guess, like, maybe you have done that, now that I'm looking. There's not really much shadow on that side. I guess we have shadows all the way around these hands. And so I would expect maybe one side to have shadow and one side not to have shadow. But, I mean, looks cool. It's super awesome. Great job. And here's Gemini, a version of Tom Brady for the Super Bowl. That is cool. So took a photograph of Tom Brady, the football player quarterback, and made this painting based on him. I think you've done a really fantastic job. I'm actually really surprised. You know, he's what, 43 years old or something, so he's not a young guy anymore, so he does have a little bit of that gray coming into his hair and eyebrows, and I think they've captured that. What would I say here? I think there's a little bit in the nose here. I think this nostril is a little bit too low. It should go up a little bit higher, and also maybe not be as dark as this one. And maybe this ear needs to be a little bit, probably the ear might be a little bit darker anyway, and that shadow could be a little bit more akin to, I mean, super minor, but very cool. And doing any writing is also quite difficult, so I'm impressed that you were able to paint the text on there. Very well done. Great job, and it makes me super happy that people are making paintings about things that are happening in real time, because it helps make painting more relevant. You know, like, I think that's why I'm transitioning. I've kind of split the course, or these two, into a Tuesday and Thursday. And one, we're continuing to paint things based on artists that I think everybody should know, that there's valuable things we can learn from them. But on our Thursday class, trying to make original paintings based on stuff that's happening, so that people have the sense that it's like, it's not just I've just learned this skill, but what do I do with this skill? It's like, now I know the skill, now I can start applying it to things in the world, and to painting my world or our world, or right, and things that interest yourself and her, right? So that's because ultimately that's where you want to get to. You learn all this stuff, and then you know, it's like taking a cooking class. Well, okay, this is great. Now I learned all these techniques, but now I want to be able to cook at home, right? Rather than, because I've taken a lot of cooking classes and then never really applied all of that knowledge to anything beyond, like, you know, buttering toast, basically. So look at this, Charmai's version of a David Hockney paint. I think I talked about, is this a new one that you sent me, Charmai? I can't remember. But you've been doing, I think, a few of these David Hockneys that have turned out really, really, really well. So this is fantastic. I mean, what am I going to say? David Hockney was the artist who did David Hockney was the artist that did the Sleeping Dogs we did like back in November, and obviously did these kind of landscapes. And so the fact that you're doing these, Charmai, is just mind-boggling. You should be really, really excited with these achievements. I don't know what else to say. I think we talked about this last time. We talked about this one last time. This is Molly just posted this earlier today. I think, again, from another teacher that they're working on blocking out shapes, and which is a really important technique when we're starting to paint. This might have been even painting without doing any pencils and just starting to paint directly onto the canvas, maybe, potentially, I'm not sure. This reminds me of a group of painters whose name just suddenly, is it Les Nabis group, French painters. Oh, I love all those artists, but now I can't remember. Anyway, similar, or even like Edvard Munch, the painter of The Scream, had a similar kind of palette and style to this kind of painting. In fact, it wouldn't even surprise me if, I'm not sure, maybe this is one of your own photographs, but these chairs look a lot like that Edvard Munch style. Okay, let's continue. We talked about Sharon's Mermaid last time. Here's some owls an owl by Deborah. That is awesome, Deborah. Wow, look at that. Look at this beautiful, beautiful plumage, as Monty Python said. Very, very famous skit, the dead bird, or returning the bird. I can't remember how that one's. Beautiful plumage, eh? Let's hold on. This is really, really good job. In fact, I would say probably the area of this painting that seems the most unresolved is this kind of tree branch that the bird is sitting on. I think it might benefit with a little bit more attention to that area of the painting, because so much the rest of it is just so well done that I think it would serve you a little bit because this feels a little bit unfinished, a little hurried here. And I always think you want the whole painting to look like you've given it the same level of attention, right? So that, because I imagine this, you spent probably 2 or 3 hours painting the owl, and then maybe 10 minutes painting this stuff down here. And I would suggest if you spend 2 hours painting this, you may want to think of spending 2 hours or an hour painting this, and the background, for instance, right? So that they all seem to be kind of in harmony with one another, right? It's the same sort of thing like if you go to a really nice restaurant and you order like a really nice meal, or you order, I don't know, gourmet hamburger, and it's like a $50 hamburger, but the side is just like scooped out of a thing and put on, and you're like, well, the burger was the best burger, but it just was like this thing slopped on there. Like, I wish the side was as thought through as the burger itself, because I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm just nitpicking. I think great painting, I just feel like when I see really great things, I'm like, I wish I could be, like, we're so close to perfection here. So here's Heidi's painting of Reg Jean Page. I'm not sure who that is. There's probably somebody super famous that I'm not aware of, or it could be a friend, I don't know. I remember I saw when you posted this, people in the group were freaking out, like, whoa, that's really good. What are you doing in this group? I know Heidi's has a lot more experience probably than most other people in the class. But I think it's also really exciting to see people who are a little bit further down, more advanced, and you think like, hey, you know, getting to that place it's just a little bit, just doing what I'm doing now, and I'm just going to keep on getting better and better, and one day I will be there, right? Just fantastic artwork. I don't know, not much I can really add to it. Could I say? I guess one thing that we are missing the body here. I guess I don't mind that this is a little bit darker down here. It is a little bit odd, but it works. I'm sure somebody said, well, I saw on your Instagram. I have done similar things like that. So I don't mind it. It's just this reflection seems like, I mean, you know, again, it goes into like, because there are some, like, I guess what I'm thinking about is blending, and there are very strong opinions in like art community as to like, in terms of blending. Some people really like that more impressionist type of thing where we have paint and we can see the distinct brushstrokes, and some people want it to be more like Vermeer or Leonardo, where things are very smooth and blended. I mean, I don't know. I think it turned out really well. I'm also really impressed with the way that you've got some of these darker, warm tones, these reds in the face. I think a lot of people would be very afraid to put that color in those spaces because they figure like that it feels a little risky. Same thing with like putting this green right there. But it all works. That's what's so cool about painting, is things that you don't expect to work are there. And it's not like this requires your imagination. It just requires careful observation to see that green and the red that are in everybody's face. As I said, in my face right now. Let's see. Here's Maud Lewis meets Takashi Murakami on Chinese New Year's by Charmaine. When I saw this, I was like, wow, that is awesome, Charmaine. Very cool. Very funny, but, you know, like, what an interesting take on Maud Lewis and on Murakami and on Chinese New Year, for that matter, right? I think this is very fun painting, and I think probably very few people would know that these branches are kind of a nod to Maud Lewis, or even the character, or even that these are Murakami. Like, it's almost like an inside joke for everybody here in the group. But I think that's what also makes it very funny for those of us in the group, right? Because you can kind of, you're like, oh yes, I see what's going on here. Very clever, very clever. Yeah, I'm very, very proud of you for putting something like this together and sharing it with us. I like that. And you know, this shows a lot of your personality and your playful nature. I think is what's really exciting, is how paintings can communicate a lot about who we are just based on the decisions that we make. Let me see. Here's another one by Charmaine. This is a traditional Chinese New Year's poster. I've seen images like this before, so it makes me excited that you went ahead and actually made a version of it. Absolutely gorgeous. I would like to do something like this. This would be a fun painting to do. So in May, I'm devoting the whole month, because it's Asian History Month here in Canada and also in the United States. So I want to focus on probably mostly Chinese artists, because we've already talked about Japanese artists a couple times in this course with Murakami and Hokusai. So I'd like to really look and dive into Chinese painting, which is obviously a long, very rich history. And I think it would be really interesting for everybody who's following along. So, great job. I really love these colors. Very fun painting. Yeah, you're just like, everyone's getting better and better. And then I think here we have this painting by Heidi, view from Hainan. Is that? I think you said it was like the Chinese Hawaii, if I recall, in the Facebook. And wow, that is so gorgeous. You know, and looking at this, like I see some of the things that we were doing in class. Like I see a little bit of the Emily Carr in here, right? And those mountains and the purples that we put in there and the grass. So it's really interesting to see how like all the things that we've been learning kind of seep into the paintings that we're starting to create more and more on our own here. And you know, what's I think is really cool, especially if you look at this, if we zoom out, it starts looking more and more like photographic. And yet a lot of these details, you know, like some of these trees are like one brushstroke, two for some, and then a little bit, right? So it's very simple. It's very like an impressionist painting, right? Like the fewest brushstrokes possible really convey a lot, right? And I think that's where we want to get to. Is about being efficient when you're with your paints. I think that's beautiful, really cool. I think this is a photograph, I think, from your family or something that you sent, and then you made this painting based on it. So that would be like, consider, for instance, if you want to make really like gifts for friends and family members that are like really meaningful. Imagine just next time you're at their house, take a picture out their window like this, right, of the view from their window, and make a painting based on that, and give it. And when you give it to them as a gift, they're like, "Wow, this is super cool." And even if they're not super, if they're not the best painting you've ever made, imagine 20 years later when they've moved and they're a different place and they have that painting. They're like, "That's so cool. This is the view from our balcony when we lived in that house when we were raising our children," or whatever, or where the view from the hospital when I broke my leg and you went in and took that photograph out the window. Now every time I look at it, it reminds me of like that period of convalescence and getting better and healthier, and I couldn't wait to be running around in that field, but I had to wait for my leg to heal. You know what? You know, you could see, or next time you go to a friend's house, take a photograph of a few things that are on somebody's mantle, right, above the fireplace or on a shelf, and then you make a painting of some little sculpture or knickknack somebody brought back from a trip. Afterwards, they're like, "Whoa, that's so cool! I've got this, like, what were you? How did you even think about doing something like that? It's so meaningful." Okay, so very good job, Heidi. Okay. So we're going to finish off here. I think we've got about 8, 9 paintings to look at of the Kate Graham, and then we'll wrap up for the night. So here is, let's do this again. Come on. And then how about here's Donna's version of the painting. So if you recall, this is Kate Graham, or K.M. Graham, who made this beautiful Northern Lights painting, right? And it's fun. You're going to see here a number of different approaches to it. I think one thing, it seemed like people were like, "Oh, this is cool. It gives me some room to play around here." This is our final painting that we made for that course. So people really kind of feeling like they have permission, which you should, to take some chances and play around here. Sorry, I'm just taking see in the chat here, Heidi's saying about the previous painting which we were just talking about. Yes, I was thinking about Emily Carr's Autumn in France painting while I was working on the painting And it was a surprise for my parents to see the painting, but now my dad is super excited and sends me cow pictures every day. Hint, hint, make some cow pictures, right? That's awesome. I love it. And back there, Deborah says, the Norwegian Blue from Monty Python, yeah? The dead bird sketch. Yes, that's called. I did not spend time on the branch. Thank you. I'll work on it. Great. You don't have to. I'm just saying. I think it's you're on the verge of one of your best paintings, so it might benefit from just that extra little bit of attention. Okay, so here's Donna's version. I love these colors that you got here on the Arctic light, kind of moving through the sky. I love that. Particularly that green works really nice. I love this kind of rainbow effect. It was different than I did. And I think it worked really well. And then these spots where the light is glowing. That was really nice. It's interesting, this canvas is a very elongated, rectangular canvas. And it works really well for this composition. That long kind of stripe going across kind of really accentuates that. I think that was really smart. Okay. Here's Heidi's version of it. Speaking of Heidi, just a few moments ago, I think this is, I didn't even realize until I was, I looked a little bit at your comment in the Facebook there about the dolphins that you put in the clouds, right? Super subtle, right? And I wouldn't even have noticed it really until I saw the title, and then afterwards I was like, that is really cool. That is really neat. Because, often when we're looking at clouds, we see shapes and things in the clouds. And I like that it's, really, if you took these little, the fins off some of these things, you would have no idea. They would just look like the clouds like as I painted them. But that little addition just gives it that little extra little playful quality, which I think is really cool. I'm really proud of you for doing that. That's fun. It's fun to kind of find things like that you can, let your imagination run with a little bit. Here is Sue's version of the painting. Wow, that's cool. Yeah, very neat. I love how you did this, what would we call it? I guess it's just the Northern Lights, the ribbon through the air. And we have this cool blue. I think that was the first color we put down. Kind of, again, if we go back to what I was talking about with Artemisia Gentileschi painting with the hair, remember I was saying that kind of that fuzziness? We see that in here, and it gives it that radiant, glowing effect. Very cool. And then here's Charmaine's version here, and she added the ox from the Chinese New Year, or Chinese Year of the Ox. That's and this is a beautiful drawing of an ox, by the way. Great job. And it's kind of cool because I like the way it's painted like a constellation, right? It looks like kind of constellation of stars in the sky, and it's flying around in there, and it's just like the Northern Lights is also, is kind of like a mirage. It's, if you've ever seen the Northern Lights, it's almost hard to believe that you're actually looking at it, or that you can see it. It's like a dream. So I think that's really smart. Again, same sort of thing that Heidi was doing here with the dolphins or the whales dancing in the clouds. We'll see a few more people did that as well. So let's, here's Irene's version. I love that, the green there, that really neon quality worked really well. That's fun. Great job. Like you've added this extra little bit here too. So we have a bit more of a Z shape here. Very interesting. That dark blue turned out really well too. I like that. It works really well in contrast to this green. It really makes it pop. And here's Sharon's version. Wow, again, look at the freedom you took in here to have these kind of. This actually feels very Northern Lights-ish, right? Like these, like because you know they sometimes have this very distinct ribbon quality, but it's almost like those kind of tentacles or something that come down from it are what make it even more spectacular, which wasn't in Kate Graham's original version of the painting, but you have kind of included it here in your own way. I think it was a really smart choice. I mean, quite bold too. It makes me think that this was a late addition to the painting, that you got quite far and felt it needed something and added it. You were like, you know what, something's missing here, and then you just went and boom, started putting those diagonal strokes in there. And that was a major risk, right? Because you're kind of towards the end of the painting, and to do that right near the end is like, that takes a lot of confidence to do, and that's super exciting to see that happening. Again, that's very exciting, you guys. Okay, and then here's Gail's version. Wow, I love this. I like how you've got this. It looks like a bit of that, the putting the paint down and wiping the paint off, and you've left a lot of the paint wiped off, I think is how you're getting this effect. And that is really nice. I think, you know, that's one of the things I think we can, techniques we can learn from Kate Graham and how she made this painting is I think, you know, again, it's just like we were talking about Jackson Pollock accidentally dripping things on the floor, or Helen Frankenthaler pouring paint and staining, and maybe that was an accident the first. Same sort of thing with like Kate Graham. Again, and I'm not sure that the way that we painted or that I demonstrated how to paint this painting was how she did it. It was just my interpretation. But I suspect, you know, it's one of those things that in the act, like that first, like, I don't like what I'm doing, I'm just going to wipe it off. And you're like, whoa, actually, by wiping the paint off, it is way more interesting now. Like that, the look of that paint being wiped off the surface has a, I mean, there would be no way to paint it like that with a paintbrush. The only way you can get that effect is by wiping the paint off with a rag or your thumb or whatever, or another dry brush. And it's that it probably came out originally as a mistake, but then you see the results of your attempt to fix that mistake or whatever, and you see the potential in it, and that's where it gets really exciting, because it's like, oh, I just found a solution to this that I didn't even realize was even possible, right? So that is really cool. And here, I think this is our final one. So this is, I think, where we will end. This is second star to the right and straight on till morning is how Deborah, I think, maybe titled it, or I just kind of quoted that from your Facebook post. But what a very cool painting here of this like cloud boat, or like a boat going through the clouds, or a boat made of clouds, you know, surfing on this. Is this an ocean, or is it clouds? Or, you know, we've got a cool moon glowing up, and right. So that, again, just like a few of you have taken a really playful kind of twist on this painting, and that, you know, it's so fitting that of all the paintings that we did, on the very, very last one in this series, and again, we're not over. I think we're just like one chapter has concluded. We've started an all new one already. But it just shows that increasing confidence that people feel that they can really play as they go forward here. Deborah says, Peter Pan. That's what I was like, I know that's super familiar. I just reread Peter Pan last summer, or a couple summers ago, while sitting on the beach while we were visiting some friends on one of the local islands. Anyway, very cool. I love that. I love that you were able to connect this image to a story. In this case, J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan books. Very cool. Love it. What a great way to kind of wrap things up right at the end here. Okay, well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in and watching again. If you found this at all helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. I'm sure all of you have already done that. If you want to leave a donation via PayPal or any other means, the links are down below. Contact me through email if you want any other additional info to facilitate that. I'm super blown away by the work that has been created here. Again, half of you live like thousands of kilometers away from me, and on the other side of the continent, on the other side of the planet even, and have been making art, somehow stumbled upon my channel and have been painting along with me day in and day out all the way since September, right? We're in the end of February right now, so almost 5 months of painting along with each other twice a week. Makes me super excited that, as I said, about 400 images that we've looked through. This is our 6th feedback session, and you know, I could not, when I started teaching these classes, I could not have hoped for this level of engagement. So even my wife, who's, you know, she's a social media, she does that for her job. She's just like, wow, this is amazing how like excited people are, and how they've engaged, and how they're participating, and the comments. So I'm super touched, and it's because of that energy that you guys have generated that has encouraged me to keep on doing more. And that's why we're now doing the master study and the paint the news. The master study, I've already feel like I've got a pretty good idea on how I want to move that forward, and I don't want to give everything away, but I put that poll a couple days ago, and pretty much everything that you guys have posted we are going to do over the next couple of months, so stay tuned for that. And then the paint the news, I still kind of have some ideas. I'm trying to just get that started and organize that. So I was going to show you something, but I'm going to save that for a future episode. I have something a little bit off camera here. Yeah, I could go on and on with effusive praise for all of those of you that have been with me for this journey, and I'm so excited to see where we go from here on in. So thank you, everybody. We're going to do a whole new set of these feedback sessions for the other paintings that we're currently making. So please continue to submit your paintings to the Facebook group. I love that you guys are all supporting each other with great positive criticism and feedback, and helping each other grow. That's how we all grow as artists, right? It's sort of, we have a virtual classroom here. So thank you again. We'll see you guys on Tuesday. We're gonna make a painting by another one of my favorite artists. This is the Jacob Lawrence. He's one of the great titans of art as well. And then, as I said, we'll do a Leonardo da Vinci, a Giorgio O'Keeffe painting in just a couple of weeks. So lots of big stuff coming down the pipelines to keep us busy, and lots of challenges. Don't don't fret. And if you feel things are too easy, don't worry. I'll keep you challenged. If you feel things are too difficult, then don't worry. We're going to try to keep this kind of I try to balance it out with some maybe more difficult ones and easier ones, and back and forth. And the very fact that you attempt to do some of those more difficult ones is like testament to your own desire to grow and learn and challenge yourself, which are things that I think should also be acknowledged. That the fact that all of you guys are doing this, no one's forcing you to do it, and that you are, is like a real, I mean, that should be something that you should feel very proud of yourself for really embracing this new part of yourself and this new identity as an artist. Okay, I go on and on, I could go on. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we shall see you very soon. Bye-bye.